This is a report saying that you should have told the church. It should
Yes,
have gone public, and it was all your responsibility.
yes.
And because you didn't go public, so he's saying people should have gone public with this.
After an hour of me kind of going through this report, um, Rick had to end the meeting abruptly. He had to leave abruptly, and he said, "Well, I want you to know I still believe that this report about you is true, and I still may use it to speak about you publicly. Listen, this has been my spiritual family literally since I got saved. You know, I've considered Rick to be a father literally since I got saved, and I still do, you know."
Hey, welcome to the Minor Prophets podcast. I'm Jeff Simons, joined as always by my intrepid co-host, John Mark Baker. John Mark, how are you?
I am intrepid, bro. I, I thought about being trepid once, and then I said, no, I'm not going to be trepid. I'm going to be intrepid.
Better than
And,
intrepidation?
Yeah, well, yeah, you don't want intrepidation. Well, you do want intrepidation. You don't want trepidation.
Whatever. we're gonna get lost in our own words. Well, we have a special episode with Justin Perry from Supernatural Theology. Justin, thank you for joining us on this episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Now, Justin, Morningstar has been in the news for a whole bunch of different things in the past 6-7 months. And for those that aren't aware, most of the names that people are familiar with when it comes to Morningstar is Rick Joyner and Chris Reed and Todd Bentley now. But for those that maybe aren't keeping track, remind us of your involvement at Morningstar.
Yeah, so I began as a student in 2002. I'd been reading Rick Joyner's books since I got saved in the year 2000, and just over the years became very involved and came on staff in 2011. Took over one of the schools at the time, the College of Theology. I later, 3 years later, became the lead pastor of the Morning Star Church in Fort Mill, and then in 2021. I became the executive pastor under Chris Reed as lead pastor, and I also took the lead of Morningstar University as the director of that school. So I kind of had all kinds of hats and a bunch that I didn't mention over about a 20-year period.
Now, you had a video that got a little bit of attention, and you've been fairly quiet since, and there's been things happening behind the scenes. So for those that have been waiting to hear from you, can you give them a little bit of background on where has Justin been?
Yeah. So I did release a video in August of last year in response to some things that were going on, and I have been quiet on those topics that the video was related to ever since then. And I do just want to mention the reason why, kind of right on the front end here. First of all, there's been a couple court cases, a criminal case and a civil case related to some things that happened at Morningstar, which have also been in the news. And I've been kind of peripherally involved with those, as in I've had some conversations with lawyers. I have a couple times it's been recommended to me not to speak about these things until, and I believe the until is fulfilled now. I had a subpoena that I was complying with up until a couple weeks ago. I also have been attempting to walk out a Matthew 18 process of addressing these things privately before beginning to speak about them publicly. And I also, just been wrestling through the complications and the um, disillusionment, pain, all of those things of some of the things that have happened. But I do feel like it's time now to just tell a little more of my story. And it's not really my story, the story of what has happened, and some parts that I believe are important that I add important that the body of Christ hears. So yeah, that's kind of where I've been for the past 6 months or so. Off in my world, talking about supernatural theology and other things, but not really talking about Morningstar.
Well, so your involvement in the news stories, even though you haven't been at Morningstar for a bit, is that you had this role of leadership from the transition from Rick Joyner to Chris Reed, and all of the events from the news seem to kind of spurred on uh, once Chris announced his resignation. Then we have the Julie Roy's article, etc. So can you kind of walk us through some of the events that happened?
Yeah. So in 2021, Chris had been at Morningstar for I think around 3 months or so, somewhere in there. And we later found this out that he had begun a relationship with a student. Chris is married. Obviously, the student is an adult and it was consenting, but obviously immoral. And this student revealed their relationship to myself and Tom Hardiman in 2021 in I forget, oh, in January of 2021, and just let us know the details of their relationship that I won't necessarily go into. It's been put out there, and people can look into that if they want to. But this was a major shock, obviously, to Tom and I. And we called Rick Joyner to let him know that we had just discovered this. Um, he encouraged us to call Chris to ask him if this was true. And so we did. And Chris admitted to everything. You know, he admitted to all of the things that Catherine, the student, had said had happened. And we, over the next few weeks, the next 2 weeks, spent a lot of time meeting with Chris uh, and Catherine and some other family members that were involved. And whenever I say we, it was some was me and Tom, and a lot of it was me and Tom and Rick, just getting the facts of what happened. Also, kind of trying to drill down on how did this happen? Why did this happen? Had anything like this happened before? And just really trying to understand the situation and get together a game plan for where do we go from here? What do we do next? So that was how everything came to light in 2021.
Now, one of the things that when Rick made his video in, or I guess it was his sermon that was in response to Chris stepping down. He first he implied that he was surprised by it and that other people they thought something else was going on, and this is obviously in response to the Julie Roy's article. Also, they came out in quick succession. I had an initial question when I first read the Julie Roy's report of, okay, so if he repented of it, and at the time there was this back and forth between him and Rick, between the Rick's rants and Chris's videos, and the only thing that they agreed on was, there was a restoration process and he went through this restoration process, and you were involved, Catherine was involved, Tom Hardiman was involved, and my question is, if he confessed it and he owns it, and they're making trying to make restitution for it, it's being overseen. Kind of leads me to two questions. One, does it need to go public? Because one of the things that we get on our channel is, you're just an exposure channel. And my statement is, well, you go public, you rebuke an elder if they continue in sin. So if he's not continuing in sin, it doesn't necessarily need to be rebuked publicly. And Matthew 18 is, if they repent in the process of being confronted, you don't need to escalate. Yet this one kind of went out into the Julie Royce article. So what are
Mhm.
your feelings on publicizing these events, because at the time it looked like somebody from Morningstar, either from Rick or staff or something like that, was releasing this story to Julie Royce as a way of getting attention off of their court cases.
Hmm. Yeah, so that's a really good question. Should these kind of things go public if they've been privately repented of, and the leader is no longer continuing in sin? And that was really what Rick and Tom and I were dealing with whenever this came out, is what is the appropriate way to handle this. And so we spent a good deal of time praying during those 2 weeks. We did some fasting as well, if I remember correctly, and we decided to bring it to the board, to the Morningstar board, which they meet in February. And so it just happened that the board meeting was coming up anyway. And so at the time, I'm not on the board, but I was told that the details were going to be shared with the board, that everything was going to be shared with the board, and then they were going to come up with a plan for how to move forward, and we were basically going to follow what the board agreed to, and that would include Rick and Tom, obviously, because they're on the board. And so the board meeting happened. I was told afterwards that everything was shared with the board, and that because Chris had ended the relationship, Chris and Catherine had decided to end the relationship, and it did seem at the time that Chris was repentant, um, that he did not qualify for the 1 Timothy 5, rebuke the elder in front of all, that this didn't need to be released in front of everyone, that it could be dealt with privately. And so at the time, the plan was presented to me. This was the plan that I was told that was agreed upon by the board, that Tom and I were going to step in for a time, for an indefinite period of time, and kind of come alongside Chris to take on his responsibilities, which would have been with the church and the School of the Prophets, and that Chris was going to take a step back in order to uh, I guess, sort through what had happened, and hopefully get some healing and things like that. It was never defined to me exactly what that meant or exactly how that was going to play out in the coming months or years. But so, in answer to your question, so at the time, I was actually in agreement with that plan, that it didn't necessarily need to go public. I was happy to follow the lead of my superiors in that situation, and I was in agreement with it. And in general, I think it's kind of case by case whether these things need to go public or not. But I think that it's a pretty clear standard biblically that if the leader continues in sin, if they're not repentant, then it has to be made public, because obviously they are a danger to the flock if these things are not made public.
Yeah, I think that there's another consideration here as well. It is the qualification for eldership within the body. So you've got First Timothy and you have Titus that give out these qualifications. One of them being they are the husband of one woman. Many commentators say that means that you're a one woman man. Now, so there's debate about, does a single affair disqualify somebody from ministry forever? I don't know. I do think that the congregation in question, so, you know, whether that goes public to the whole internet and the whole world, whatever, I, I don't know that that's necessary in every case, because not everybody has a global, international public ministry, right? But the people who are receiving ministry from this individual deserve to know, I think, whether or not that person has abused the authority that they have been entrusted with by the congregation for the purpose of gratifying themselves sexually, at the expense of a member of the flock that's under the care of the elder in question.
Hmm.
I think that the congregation, I think, deserves a say in whether or not there is uh, that person is to be restored.
Yeah, I actually think that the qualifications you're talking about from Timothy and Titus uh, are a huge factor in much of what we're seeing kind of playing out in the body of Christ right now. And there's a couple places in those, without looking it up, where it specifically says, like, you know, let them first be tested, let them not be a novice, so that the devil will not take advantage. There's a couple times that that language is used. So it's like, if these things are not adhered to, it's literally an open door for the enemy to come in and just wreak havoc. And I think that we've definitely seen that. And I do think that someone can be an elder and be disqualified even after they've been approved as an elder by those areas of their lives deteriorating. So I don't disagree with what you just shared.
And we're talking so much about the sexual aspect. I mean, there's so many others. Not given to much wine.
Hmm.
Not must not be not must not have a short temper. Um, like, so there's some there's some people that would be disqualified right off the bat, even though they've never sinned sexually. It's like, well,
Hmm.
these are the qualifications, and they're high. The standard's high, but it should be for God's house.
Yeah.
Well, and so there's a couple of details that I'm personally a little bit there's discrepancy between what Rick Joyner said publicly and, to be honest, some of the things that Catherine said. Catherine said it was reported that there was physical touch. That has always been the case, that was confessed. And Rick said that if he knew there had been touch, he would have. He said he would have acted. I don't remember what he said the result would have been, but that he would have acted or responded differently. Is that what was actually reported? You said that Chris took ownership of everything. So if he took ownership of
Yeah.
everything, did he confess that stuff too?
Yeah, I believe what Rick has said is that if he would have known that there was any physical element of the relationship, that he wouldn't have turned the ministry over to Chris. I think that that's what he said, something along those lines. But yeah, the reality is, Rick was in meetings that I was in, where Chris did confess all of these things, and Catherine confessed all of these things. They did not hide. There might have been details, or there might have been a detail where I know Catherine mentioned there was something that she didn't disclose because she was uncomfortable. But I'll tell you, the vast majority, including the nature of the relationship, which was that there was some physical things that were going on. That was from the beginning. That was the story. Like, there was never any confusion about whether or not there was physical aspects. Catherine did not lie. Chris did not lie. And yeah, so one of the reasons that I released my video in August of last year is because I was hearing some things being said publicly that I just didn't agree with. And so I released my video in order to kind of put some distance between what was being said publicly and myself, because I had been named in the article and some other things that were going around. So my name was connected to it, and had I not spoken out, it would have been assumed that I agreed with the things that were being said publicly. Um, so I was hearing things being said like, I didn't know there was a physical element. If I did, I never would have turned the ministry over. Rick was saying he wanted to give Chris and Catherine a lie detector test. um, he was saying he was talking about a year plus restoration process, which I'm not aware of. I didn't hear that kind of language being used back then. I wasn't aware of a process like that that was going on. Um, there were some other things as well. Let's see. Oh, he was talking about how he was lied to, implying that there were other parts of it that he was lied to about as well. So I released my video to just make it clear that I wasn't in agreement with everything that was being said, but I felt like I needed to privately address those things before I publicly stated what those things were and kind of, called them out specifically.
Something just occurred to me as really as we've been interacting right now is what is your motive in communicating this? Like if there was not a discrepancy between what was being shared publicly and you have no that I can think of, I can't conceive of a motive for you to come forward and to essentially refute statements by someone that you would consider a spiritual father at a ministry that you participated in for 20 years, in staff and things like that. You're I don't want to speak for you, put words in your mouth. What is your motive in addressing these things publicly?
Yeah, so initially, whenever I um, released my video, I was really releasing my video in answer to assumptions that were being made and questions that I was being asked, not because I felt like I had to answer the questions, but more because I felt like um, it would be it would be irresponsible. It would be kind of crazy to act like these things weren't going on. I mean, I release videos regularly, and to release the next video and not address it, I think I would have lost credibility with a lot of people. But I ended up, after I released my video and after Rick, the next day on Sunday, he preached a message, and I am going to talk about my motive, and I feel like it's wrapped in all of this. Um, he uh, he preached a message the following Sunday where he talked about what happened with Chris, and he compared him to King David in this message, and compared his sin kind of to King David. He also talked about me, although he didn't use my name. He said there's a former staff member who released a video. It was very clear to everyone who he was talking about. I was getting phone calls and text messages from a lot of people as it was happening and afterwards. But and he compared my sin, which was the fact that I released a video. He compared me to Judas. He said that I had betrayed him, that I was just trying to cover my butt, that I never came to him with my concerns back then, um, and that he wouldn't trust me moving forward. And so it was a shocker. It was definitely hurtful. I mean, as you said, I have considered Rick to be a spiritual father for more than 20 years. Before I ever even came as a student, he was the main person that I was learning from, just by reading his books, listening to teachings and things. So it was it was hurtful, but more than that, there was this kind of cognitive dissonance where Rick has challenged me more than anyone in my life to speak the truth, like even to your own hurt, no matter what the cost. Like he has literally taught us that it is one of our highest values on earth is to speak the truth. And to the degree that we speak the truth is the degree we can be trusted with spiritual authority in our words. And so I emailed him the next day, and I sent him a large packet of emails from 2021, two packets actually. One of them was our communication right when these events were happening, where we outlined the events. We had been talking about them verbally. Now we were sending it in writing along with our concerns, very clearly spelled out. Here's our concerns. Um, here's the things that happened, and here's specifically why we feel like it will be a bad idea to continue moving in the direction that we are. We also I sent a second bunch of emails from 2021 that was a compilation of prophetic words and dreams and things like that people had sent in the previous year or so, where we felt like the Lord was warning us that something was coming that could be a real challenge, and that the way we handled it was very serious. And then we recommended to Rick some actions. Here's what we propose moving forward. So I sent Rick this the day after he preached his message, where he responded to my video and said those things about me. And I said, it occurred to me that maybe you didn't remember what happened in 2021. So here is all of our emails. I also have text messages from that time. And I'm entreating you as a father, Rick. You've challenged me always to speak the truth, and I'm appealing to you as a son to accurately represent what happened whenever these things came to light and whenever we dealt with them. And so he said, thanks for sending these, and I'll get back to you when I can. So 10 days later, he had not responded. So I followed up again and said, I'm just following up on these emails. Again, even if you forgot in the past couple years what happened, here's all of the evidence, and I'm hearing you say these things publicly that don't match with what is written in these emails. And I said, again, I'm appealing to you as a father, and you know, you and I both know this is the path of blessing for Morningstar, is to speak accurately about these things. And I also asked him, was the board told the truth in 2021?
So wait,
Because
sorry, I just want to interrupt you real quick. So at this point, are you, you know, so for those that don't know, Rick has had a stroke. So
yeah,
so at this point, I'm putting myself in your shoes and just imagining. Okay, you're probably assuming this might have something to do with that. You're giving, assuming positive intent, and
absolutely,
you're
100%.
okay. So you're thinking, okay, this is a father. He's had a health issue that could be affecting his recollection of these events.
Yes,
And
that was totally where I was coming from, and I was specifically thinking about the stroke.
and the things that, so the discrepancies that you're talking about in specific, just so that our listeners don't get lost here,
Hmm.
you're saying, hey, the Julie Roy's article that alleges that there was grooming and then sexual contact between uh, Chris Reed and Catherine. You're saying Rick knew all of it. Everything was confessed, and now Rick is publicly saying, I had no idea, and you're trying to remind him
Hmm.
that no, you did know the extent of this back in 2021 when this is being discussed, right?
Right. Yeah, there was something that Catherine mentioned either in the report or in the interview she did, where she said, this thing I did not disclose to them at the time, but other than that, I heard either from Catherine or from Chris all of the things that have now become public. And, Rick was in those same meetings, and we wrote them out in emails, which we sent back then, and which I resent September 1st, I believe it was, of last year. And so, yeah, I'm appealing to him as a father. I just can't wrap my head around, why am I hearing these things that are being said publicly, and I'm believing the best, and I'm, just I don't know. It was heartbreaking. I told him I'm experiencing a painful kind of cognitive dissonance. Hearing you speak about these things publicly in this way, uh, knowing that what actually happened is what is written here in these emails. Uh, I mean, I vividly remember the meetings as well. It was such a dramatic couple of weeks that I knew there's no way that I could forget those things. And I thought maybe he had. A lot has happened since then, and he did go through a stroke. And so, yes, that is why I was not letting it go, and that's why I was appealing to him and kind of pressing the issue.
So when this thing came out, Chris Reed leaves Morningstar, and it appears to be abruptly, and the reason he cites, which it seems believable to me, is like there was a lawsuit being brought by one of the victims of abuse that had happened at Morningstar, um, or at least associated with Morningstar by a Morningstar staff member. And Rick Joyner made a statement. I can read part of it here. Actually, maybe I can share my screen so that you guys can see it. Um, so here, as to the scandal of how several of the youth at Morningstar were SA'd by a volunteer worker that was a police officer, this is true. As soon as we heard about this, we called the police, who came and investigated it and charged the man responsible. We did everything we knew to do to cooperate with the investigation and to help the victims and their families get healed of this terrible assault. Overall, we felt that the victims and their families dealt with this with remarkable grace, but one decided to sue us. Evidently, they're not dealing with this with remarkable grace, because they alleged many outrageous things about the ministry that are not true. None of the leaders of Morningstar were charged with anything or were in any way involved in this. There was no negligence found on our part. There was drinking and corn given to underage minors by the police officer charged, but to our knowledge, none of this happened at a Morningstar event or property. So some of this is, being contested in the facts of the case, but it seems that the reason Chris Reed left Morningstar so abruptly is that he didn't want to be involved in a lawsuit with the family of a victim. And he didn't want to be the face of a ministry that was taking a victim to court. And I empathize with that wholeheartedly. I think Chris did a good job there in refusing to go to court. He wanted to settle or something like that. For whatever reason, that was not an option, and so Chris resigned. Then Rick makes this statement where he blames everything in sort of on this serious. He says, "This is a serious situation. I've seen this kind of thing several times over the 50 plus years I've been in ministry, and I've seen it rob some with very powerful gifts of years of effective ministry. One was me, as this deception came upon me and cost me more than 10 years of ministry." We don't know what Rick is telling on himself about there, but that's a thing. "I saw it cost Bob Jones 8 years, and I think it cost Paul Cain his ultimate purpose." So we're seeing the theme here. This is some sort of sexual sin. "It is the most deceptive spirit I've ever dealt with, and right now I think Chris Reed is in a battle for his future." Okay, so can you give me your reaction to that, Justin? Like, that seems like, so Chris Reed doesn't want to be involved in the lawsuit. He leaves. It seems kind of like convenient timing for Rick to be blaming Chris's departure, not on him not wanting to be part of a lawsuit, but on this sexual sin that he's just now pretending that he learned about. Does that seem like the right take?
You know, I don't know why Rick released that. I don't know what was behind it. I don't know what he was thinking or what he was feeling or what his motive was whenever he released that. I think he deleted that shortly after he posted it, didn't he? Was that the one that he posted and then ended up deleting shortly thereafter? So maybe after he did that, I don't know why he deleted it either. So yeah, so I guess
Yep.
I'm trying to be careful not to give my opinion about it. I obviously had been gone from Morningstar for about a year and a half whenever this happened and whenever Rick released that statement. So I don't know what was behind that or why he released it. So I I don't really know how to respond other than to say that I saw it whenever it came out, and it was a pretty surprising, pretty shocking thing to read.
I want to go back to one of the things that was a little bit, well, there's two things that were odd. One is Rick in his statement when he talks about this oversight process, he mentions himself and he mentions Tom Hardiman. He omitted you from that process. And then we have Catherine, the victim, who said, "Oh no, Justin Perry was there too." So, you're part of this process, right?
Yeah, I was very much a part of the process. Um, Whenever Rick, I think, if I remember the timeline correctly, whenever he began to talk in more detail about the process uh, of how we handled this, it was after I had released my video. And so uh, I wondered if perhaps leaving me out of the story would, or maybe I should say it like this. I guess I wondered if including me in the story would give more credibility to me and thus more credibility to my video. So he decided not to include me. But I can tell you this thing consumed probably 20 hours a week of my life for about a month, just trying to handle it well.
I want to one more thing that Rick said in this sermon on September 1st before we go into uh, you're attempting to approach him and try to bring clarity to it. He said that Chris is there for a couple months. The events happen with Catherine. It gets discovered. It's confessed, and a couple of months after it's been brought up, and it goes to the board, which if I remember correctly, you're not aware of what happened in the board meeting because you're not on the board. Is that accurate?
I was told that the board was told everything, that
Okay.
the board was told, the whole truth of everything that we knew at the time, which we knew everything at the time, but
Do
I
you
was
know
not in
who's
the meeting.
Do you know who is on the board?
I do, yeah. There's probably a list online of who. Well, actually, let me take that back. I know some people who are on the board. I don't. I honestly don't know who is on the board anymore, but I know that there was about, probably 10 people or so on the board as of 3, 4 years ago.
Okay.
3 years ago,
Anybody that was on the board at that time that you can confirm, like Lance Wallnow, Cindy Jacobs, any other
Cindy
people
Jacobs
that
is not on the board.
she was not on the board
Well,
then or is not
you,
now?
you, I don't know that she's ever been on the board, but I could be wrong. I know she wasn't on the board whenever I was on staff.
Okay. So that was something that was recently surfaced by another YouTube channel, Brother Elwing. He found somewhere that had listed different people that were on the board.
Elving.
El Oh, I said it with a W. Elving. Sorry. Just remember, my name is John Mark. Um, yeah. Okay. So you're not aware. You were told that the board is given everything. Um, Here's the thing that's confusing to me. So a couple months later, Chris is made the CEO. Rick said in this sermon in September, he said, well, I wanted to make him the acting president because I wanted to see if he did another stupid thing. That statement suggests that he wasn't trustworthy yet in Rick's eyes. He thought, well, we'll see. And that he was treating the congregation like guinea pigs. Maybe it'll work out. Maybe he'll take advantage of somebody else. That's a shocking thing to say as a leader of a ministry. There's somebody out that we have a recent concern with, and we're just gonna put them in a position of authority. It actually aligns with things that we've seen even recently. as you know, as recent as the New Year's Eve type things, where again people are being put in positions that are authoritative in the body and prioritizes the person in charge, not the people in the congregation. Any comments on him saying that he wanted to see if he did another stupid thing?
Yeah, well, I can tell you at the time, I believe it was in mid or maybe even late February, whenever the board was told, and then the plan that was told to me is that Tom and I were going to step in, Chris was going to take a step back, and then it was maybe early April, sometime in the first couple weeks of April, that it was announced to a group of our leaders at the time that Chris was going to be stepping in as acting president, and that was the first I had heard of that. My assumption was, because of the conversations we were having, that there was going to be an indefinite period of time that that plan was going to be put on halt, and that, again, I didn't ask for a lot of detail. I think I made assumptions, and I was incredibly busy at the time, so I had assumptions, and I was shocked whenever that happened, that he was made acting president. Um, and that kind of language was never used with me at the time, that we're going to have him step in as acting president and see if he makes any more mistakes. At the time, it was said he's going to step in as acting president, and you relate to him as you've been relating to me. The problem is the other leaders in the room, which it was the entire leadership team of Morningstar, they didn't know what had happened with Chris. And so, you know, yeah, it was a really difficult situation to be in. Also because, although it was never said to me, I did not have any assumption that I was going to be over Chris, but Tom Hardiman, who was my supervisor, was vice president of spiritual services, and supposedly he and I together were going to be overseeing something that had to do with Chris. Again, I just should have gotten more details. So to now know that he was going to be over us and he was going to be our supervisor, it pretty much, you know, decimated any possibility of uh, us being able to oversee a process where he was going to, at some point, be approved, or a process that was going to eventually end in it being decided whether or not he would take over Morningstar. So
And this
yeah,
and this is the restoration process. Is Chris is in charge. The end.
yeah. I mean, there could have been meetings that were happening that I was not a part of, but I can tell you, I was working very closely with Tom and very closely with Chris, really until I left, and I was not aware of, what was going on that would have been considered a restoration process.
Okay, so you've uh, you've brought this stuff back to you've brought it back to Rick. You've kind of laid out the email. He says he's going to get back to you, and what kind of walk us through. Okay, so what happens next? You guys are going to have some
Yeah,
kind of meeting.
yeah. So, um, follow up 10 days later, kind of challenging him again on his narrative of what happened in 2021. I also asked him if the board was told the truth in 2021. And he responded to me and told me that I needed to repent, that I was in danger of becoming a stumbling block. He told me that I did not follow Matthew 18 before I released my video, the one that I released in August of last year, which was confusing to me because I said, well, you didn't reach out to me before you started speaking publicly about these things. And I feel like I'm actually speaking the truth about what happened back then, so I don't understand how Matthew 18 even applies to this. He told me that his lawyers were watching all of my videos and that I was putting myself in jeopardy. He checking to see if I'm forgetting anything. Uh, yeah, so he says all of those things, and this is, you asked me about my motives for why I'm speaking publicly. One is because I think Matthew 18, after I addressed this privately and later with others, which I'll get to in the story, I think Matthew 18 obligates you to have some sort of a public, um, you know, statement about these things. But
And
also,
you're
uh,
saying Matthew 18 as it applies to Rick.
yes, yeah.
Okay.
So what I was trying to do was Matthew 18, privately sending him the emails from back then and challenging him where I felt like the facts were being misrepresented. And I ended up asking for a meeting and eventually getting a meeting where I was trying to take it to the next step of Matthew 18. If you're ineffective privately, then take others with you. But let me just finish this about. So when he responded, he said all those things to me, and this is also part of my motive. He said, also, I want you to see a report that that some staff had uh, that some staff created about you and about your tenure as pastor, as a leader here at Morningstar. And so I see the attachment, and it was this very lengthy critique report about me. And the premise of this report was that I did not tell Rick and Tom the truth about what happened with Chris back in 2021. So that's sort of the premise of the report, which I flatly disagree with. And there's 1,000 reasons why that I think are very plain evidence. They knew everything that I knew. Um, but because I did not tell them the truth, I am complicit in the events that happened that ended up with people being hurt at Morningstar. Because I did not tell the truth, um, there's so much I'm trying to remember here. It says that I do not have a value. It appears that I do not have a value for integrity or honesty or transparency. It says that what
And
I should have done.
these are all bad things, right? If somebody were to do something similar to this, would this be in any way reflecting badly on their leadership?
Oh, absolutely. It tore me apart. I mean, it was basically a report on how horribly I mishandled all of this, and what a horrible leader I am. Um,
And so I guess what I'm getting at is all of those things are things Rick has done,
mm,
and and this is all being sort of put at you as though you are culpable for all of these. Like it's like you're admitting these are mistakes. Oh,
right. These
but
are bad things.
these are bad things that you're accusing me of doing. But I happen to know I'm not the one who did all this.
Yeah, I definitely know I did not do these things. It also says that I should have told the church in 2021 about what happened with Chris, and that I am guilty because I did not do that. And the thing that
So
is,
so this is a report. Okay, hold on. we we've talked about this and before, and it is
Mhm.
now just dawning on me right now as we are talking about this. This is a report saying that you should have told the church. It should
Yes,
have gone public and it was all your responsibility.
yes,
And because you didn't go public. So he's saying people should have gone public with this. Is what Rick is saying.
The author of the report said that since I released a video in August 2021, um, I think it said that I criticized Morningstar's leadership, which I really didn't. In my video of August 2021, I was just recounting the timeline of events, really. But that therefore I should have back then stood on stage and told the church what Chris did before I left Morningstar. And the way that I was reading this as, and it took me it took me a couple weeks to really wrap my head around what this report was saying. At first I was thinking, like, is he talking about? I thought of a situation that Tom and I were handling back then, and I'm thinking, is he talking about that? And then it just dawned on me: is he saying I didn't tell them what happened with Chris, as in this whole thing with the student? Like, I think the literal top of my head blew off like an emoji, like it just blew my mind. And if
That's why you
they
wear the hats.
feel, that's why I always wear the hat now. If they feel that it was disruptive for me to release a video in August of last year telling my story, vaguely even, then can you imagine if I would have told the church in 2021 what Chris did? Because here's the thing, maybe I should have done that. To be honest, I'm not even, I don't even know if that would have been the right thing to do. At the time, I did not feel like it was the right thing to do, um, because I was following the lead of, I mean, I was a part of the discussion, but clearly there's a hierarchy of leadership, and I was in agreement with the leadership who was over me. And so for the report to say that I should have done that, if I'm guilty of that, then so is Rick, so is Tom, so is Chris, and so is the Morningstar board. Because they, and the board, at least, I don't know what they were told, but if they were told the truth, then we all have the same level of guilt in that regard.
Well, and back to, when do you go public? Again, the statements were, we're going to keep this private. People don't need to know about it. For the 2 months that that's happening, that you would have had the ability to go forward, the direction has been, we can privately restore Chris. But now, then once you make him the acting president, I'm pretty sure you'd have to get permission from him in order to get in front of the congregation to make that statement.
Or I would have to disrespect and dishonor everything that I've ever known and been taught about, honoring leadership and, you know, so again, maybe I should have done that, but if that is true, then so should everyone else who, who was involved. And the other thing I want to mention, because I just saw it in my notes, it also said, it said perhaps the reason that Justin released his video in August of 2024 is because he was jealous, or because he felt slighted that Chris and Tom were placed over him in 2021.
Well, it's a,
Which, I don't know for sure if I should have told the church before I left. I don't think actually that was the right thing to do, but I do know I was not jealous. Like, I deny that accusation. It was a challenging season for a lot of reasons, but I wasn't jealous. I was honestly just, I had my hands very full, and I was trying to do the best with my responsibilities and serve the people that I have responsibility for. But that was definitely not a part of my motive.
well, it's a common tactic when people can't refute your actions. They assign false motives, right? So, oh, you did it because you were jealous, you're offended, you're bitter, um, you're whatever, fill in the blank. They'll ascribe motives. That's why one of the things that we're trying to do when we have episodes like this is we try to avoid filling in the blanks with why people do things. We're not afraid of asking the question, why would somebody do that? But we're not
Mhm.
going to answer for them. We'll leave that to the individual to either explain it or a viewer to kind of fill in the blanks with their own opinion. Um, here's something that I find concerning is, so we've had Stephen Powell on the show. Stephen explained that, and I've had several conversations with him about the events at Morningstar with Todd Bentley back in 2019. During that time, the reason that he released publicly the list of allegations, and I've heard some of the testimony of the things that involved Todd Bentley, that it is some of the most horrifying things I've heard of a minister doing. And the reason that he said he released it is, he said, well, Rick had put together a document and had shown it to them that was essentially blaming Stephen for the failed process of Todd's restoration, that it would have been successful. Everything was in process, and yet the reason that he had to go public was because Rick was crafting this narrative. And it sounds like you experience a similar thing a few years later. And I'll share my opinion. If I were in your shoes, I would have started with the assumption of, okay, this is probably related to the stroke or something like that. You give people the benefit of the doubt, right? That we don't ascribe negative motives when there's potential reason for something else being at play. I have read almost every book that Rick Joyner has written. I listen to the final quest on Audible regularly.
Yeah.
It's something for me that reminds me of the importance of living for heaven instead of, the things on earth. And, so it is the person that I've become acquainted with through his writing, and now reconciling what we're seeing publicly it's shocking, because without having you comment on what Stephen went through, what you're saying matches what he said about his experiences in 2019. And I'm having a hard time reconciling the author of these books that I've loved and what I'm seeing, when he says people have spiritual rabies, or they're wolves, or that I think Stephen said that he referred to him as referred to him as a not nice name before. So seeing that played out is kind of hard to reconcile. So this is somebody that you've loved really and run with for a long time. So what does it feel like? You get this list and it's blaming you for everything.
Not only that, it also concludes with three action items. The first is uh, release this report to the congregation, make a public statement on Justin, and something like carefully study his leadership and basically learn from his mistakes. So it was specifically stated this was created to go public, basically.
The
So
failings
yes,
in leaderships are all your fault, and that Morningstar needs to learn from it. So you get this meeting scheduled, and what happens?
yeah. Yeah. Oh, and with the report, he said that I had forced him to begin publicly refuting the things that I'm saying. So, in other words, I came away with a clear understanding that he intended for this to go public. So, I responded and said, we need to meet and talk about these things. And it took about a month to get a meeting. We finally had to meet by Zoom. I had someone else in the meeting with me. Rick had a couple people in the meeting with him. Um, and I started out the meeting. I mentioned to him his sermon where he compared me to Judas, compared Chris to King David. I was half joking. It was just so absurd that, and he kind of chuckled about it as well. And then I said, I feel like it's a disgrace that whenever I appealed to you as a father to, accurately reflect the events of 2021 and sent you these emails from the time that outline what happened, that your response was to send me this critique that outlines what I view to be false accusations, very misleading statements that I can clearly refute with things that are written. And it ended up in the meeting as I was going through refuting the accusations. I even had the other two people who were in the meeting with Rick were backing me up in some of my refutations of what was written in the report. Um, and he said, "Well, I feel like you betrayed us, and I feel like you released your video to cover your butt." And I said, "Well, it appeared to me that what the way you were speaking about this publicly was what I said it seemed like you were trying to cover your butt, like you were trying to save face for Morningstar." And I said, and I really take issue with the things that you've said about me publicly, and I want to go point by point in this report. And so I did that for an hour, just going point by point, giving examples of why these things were false. And I feel like, in my biased opinion, I irrefutably destroyed this critique that was written about me. It was just one of the main complaints that Rick had with me is that he said whenever I left Morningstar, I said that I was happy with the way everything was going, that I didn't have any issues, that that it was just a very positive, and that I didn't tell him before I left that I had problems with the way things were going. And to some degree, I would say that that is true, and I should have spoken to him more about, about the issues I was having. First of all, I didn't see or talk to Rick much that final year that I was there at Morningstar. Second of all, I did not say to him, I don't have any issues with the way things are going and everything is great. What I said to him is, I want you to know I'm not leaving because I am bitter or angry. I said, I love you and I love Julie, I love Chris and I love Missy. But the Lord has spoken to me very clearly through a series of dreams that if I stay, it will destroy my family. And so I have to leave. And I gave Tom more detail about why I left. I gave Chris more detail about why I left. And I probably should have given Rick more detail. By that time, again, I didn't have the access to him, that I had previously. So anyway, after an hour of me kind of going through this report, um, Rick had to end the meeting abruptly. He had to leave abruptly, and he said, "Well, I want you to know I still believe that this report about you is true, and I still may use it to speak about you publicly." And I was pretty, again, amazed, mind blown at that response because it felt to me in that moment like I I thought that I thought we were just trying to get to the truth. And that's why I wanted to have the meeting, is like, let's clear up the misunderstanding here. Let's just talk about what is true. And in that moment, it felt to me like, well, it's really the truth is not really the matter at hand here like I thought it was. And so that was the way he left it. That was the last words that we spoke to each other. I mean, we might have said bye or whatever, but he had to leave pretty abruptly. We haven't had any follow-up communication. The staff members said they wanted us to meet again for reconciliation or something like that, but that didn't come from Rick, and the meeting never happened. Um, so I feel like just as I was obligated by Matthew 18 to first go privately to Rick and then to go with someone else to Rick, that I am also obligated to tell it to the church, and so that's really what I'm doing now, even though it's months later for the reasons that I mentioned at the beginning of the video. Um, I feel like it would be important for the Morningstar board to hear my perspective on these things. I feel like it would be helpful for those who are a part of the church to hear these things. And as far as I'm concerned, this is like worst case scenario. The fact that it has, that it's gone to this place, but um, I do feel like it was the right thing to do, even though it has literally it's been the most difficult 6 months or so of my life. Really, the last 3 years have been probably the most difficult of my life. I think my wife would say the same. But I do feel like this was the right thing to do.
Well, it's shocking and hard to deal with when heroes fall, and or when you find out that what you thought publicly is not what was happening privately, and it's incredibly disheartening. Let me ask you a personal question: how are you doing emotionally, spiritually, right now?
Yeah. I think I'm doing remarkably well in light of the circumstances, you know. But it has been incredibly difficult, and there's been times whenever I haven't been doing very well. The emotional and mental, and spiritual battle of all this has been intense. My wife was like, you need to tell them that you've actually been talking to a Christian counselor about this stuff. And I have been, talking to somebody about this and just trying to sort through it all. And I don't have all the answers. I have more questions than I do answers. Um, but I have needed to talk through some of this stuff because, listen, this has been my spiritual family literally since I got saved. I've considered Rick to be a father literally since I got saved, and I still do, even though it's been an incredibly difficult season. So I would say I'm doing okay, but I think I'll be doing a lot better a year from now.
Yeah, understandable. There's, so I want to ask you a couple other questions about some of the current event related things. So, something that stood out is Chris recently made a statement about him reconciling with Rick. And what it looks like is Rick has gotten a lot of pushback for trying to bring Todd Bentley out. And he says he's going to do meetings with Todd Bentley. He says Todd Bentley's got private meetings with people. This is all public knowledge. But it looks like because of the pushback that they're going to try to have Chris come back into Morningstar. It's just how things appear. Do you have any comments on that?
I have no idea, but I know nothing about the inner workings of Morningstar now.
Okay. We also had a question from somebody else. There were reports that were circulating about other accusations against Chris during his time at Morningstar. Did you hear about any of those, or was anything like that reported to you?
So at the time, I wasn't aware of any other relationships or people who came forward to say that there was or anything like that. Um, I Somewhere in the past several months, I have seen things like that maybe others have sent to me that where people said that they were going to come out with things, but I would consider that to be, hearsay. But at the time, there were not any other relationships or anything that I was aware of.
Okay. Um, John Mark, give us kind of your encapsulation. What are you thinking right now as you're
Well,
hearing
I've got
this?
one other question.
Sure.
The Stephen Coffey. Uh, that's been in the news, or at least on X, which is now the news. so, um, uh, the Morningstar Accountability Now X account has brought out some accusations of financial mismanagement, or not even accusations, rather questions about potential financial mismanagement. And essentially, Stephen Coffey is a young man who was a youth leader at Morning Star who died tragically in 2002. And a fund was created in his honor to buy a camp. And to this day, since 2002, it's now 2025, money is still being raised for this campground. You actually have some information about some of that. Could you enlighten us?
Yeah, so I think the question that was brought up is where did the money go? How was it spent? And that kind of thing. And I don't really know the answer to that question. What I do know is, at least this is what I was told, and I believe it to be true, is that there is a piece of land that Morningstar owns that was that it is supposed to be used to build the Stephen Coffey camp. And I think I've been to the place where it is. I believe it's in Moravian Falls. Um, uh, and specifically I was even told that it's a peninsula that is steep on both sides, and that it's a particular challenge to build on the land. But there were plans to build buildings on stilts with like platforms on the sides. I just mentioned that to say I know that there is some substance around the Stephen Coffey camp. I saw some level of plans, uh, and I had conversations about the land a couple times. And I do know that Stephen Coffey camps were done, like summer camps and that kind of thing, where students would come for a week or a couple weeks. Um, and I couldn't even tell you, my guess would be some were done at the Morningstar property, some were done off-site elsewhere. I just know there was a time when a lot of that kind of thing was done. Um, so I don't know the answer of where the money went, but it could very well have gone into some of the things that I am aware of. Um, so yeah, that's what I got.
So it seems as though um, the thing that happened with Stephen Powell, or the thing that looked like it was in the works to head off Stephen Powell at the pass, the crafting of a statement in order to place blame on the whistleblower in Stephen's case. Like, there's so many parallels here. Um, I it to to be honest with you, Justin, one, I'm I'm mortified on your behalf. I'm like, I this is not okay to treat anybody like this in the name of Christ. That this is a ministry, where ostensibly we're here to represent Jesus, the one who died for our sins, um, and in but in order to cover our own sins, we're gonna create statements to sort of blame somebody else that no longer works here. I I I'm astounded, uh, and I'm so sorry that you've been treated this way.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, one of the things that um, John Mark and I have talked about is in each one of these scenarios and scandals, for lack of a better word, there are key individuals that you can see their character come out in the midst of incredibly adverse stuff when they're just trying to represent Jesus. I'd say the advocate group, Alan Hood, his weeping at the Restore conference. I would say that yourself and the way that you've spoken candidly and honestly about all of all of the things that you experienced behind the scenes with a ministry and a place that you loved. I'd say that's in similar fashion. So just want to applaud you for conducting yourself with integrity and doing the best that you can in the midst of trying to grapple with a spiritual father that's, I guess, just doing the opposite of what you would hope a spiritual father would do. Um,
Well, thank you for saying that. And to be honest, I don't know if I have handled everything, correctly. I know that is definitely my intention, and that's definitely, I have no question that if I knew that to do A or B was the will of the Lord, then if I knew that, then I'm doing my best to do what is right. But I can tell you it's, I don't think I'll know how well I did with any of this, including 2021, until I meet the Lord, because it's been really challenging to navigate, uh, but thank you for saying that.
well, since you don't know, I take it all back.
Understood.
You put uncertainty in there. I'm not. I reserve the right to take it back. Yeah, it's unfortunate. It is. It's just sad. We get we get our fair share of flack and you're doing this for clicks or you're doing this for the tens of dollars that YouTube pays. um, you know, People can say what they want. I'll just say
Well,
that
well,
when you
if you don't mind me interjecting, I will say I don't know if I ever told you this, but someone had just sent me one of your guys' videos probably a few days before you reached out to me, Jeff. And I had told my wife, like, I really like these guys. I, I, I haven't followed all of what's going on online with all these controversies. Part of it's life is full, and then part of it is it's painful. But I will say that I really felt the way that you two have handled the couple situations that I watched episodes on was just done with excellence. Like your heart, you weren't rejoicing in the fall of some of those who are being exposed. It's like you're bold in the way that you're addressing things, but you're also heartbroken. So I would say, in turn, I applaud both of you for the way that you have been. Uh, Handling the things that you've been speaking about. The episodes that I've seen, I felt that they were really handled in a way that would be pleasing to the Lord.
thank you guys for joining us on this episode. If you made it this far, we bless you, and we'll see you on the next one.